if you want to learn about habits, you have to really like to learn about rats. Now, does anyone here experiment with rats on a regular basis? No hands. One hand went up. Okay, we'll find out later what exactly is going on at home. How many of you go to New York and ride the subway on a regular basis? Okay, so you know rats, right? You got plenty of familiarity with rats. There's a woman named Dr. Anne Graybiel, who's a researcher at MIT, who spent her entire career trying to figure out how to observe rats' neurological activity as they go about their daily business. And eventually she figured this out. And what she would do is that she would take a rat and she'd put sensors inside its cranium, and then she would drop it in the world's simplest maze, because she wanted to see how the rat thought as it was running through this maze. And what's interesting about this maze is that this maze works exactly the same way every single time. There's a click, this partition moves, and then the rat's free to run up and down the maze and look for the chocolate. Now, the first time you drop a rat in a maze like this, it will take that animal up to 20 minutes to find the chocolate. And so for years, most people thought that rats must be the laziest animals on the face of the planet to take 20 years. But Dr. Graybiel, when she dropped her first rat in this maze and could see what was going on inside its head, she found something kind of incredible. What she found is that the rat in the maze was thinking hard the entire time. This is a simplified neurological graph of the first time that a rat is dropped in a maze like this. And all those spikes in brain activity, that's the rat trying to make sense of what's going on. So you drop a rat in a maze, there's a click, the partition moves, and the rat starts scratching the walls, and the motor vehicle parts of its brain light up with activity. It starts sniffing the air, and its olfactory senses start to show a huge amount of neurological activity. It finally finds the chocolate, and there's this reward sensation that overtakes its entire brain. What's interesting is that even though it takes a rat 20 minutes to find that chocolate, the rat is thinking as hard as it can the entire time. And a lot of what we know about how learning happens came from this experiment, because it turns out this is the same thing that infants do. It's known as unmediated or unhypothesized learning, that when you don't know what to make sense of, you try and absorb everything. And that was pretty interesting. This was a big breakthrough in our understanding of how any animal learns about its world. But Dr. Graybiel wasn't done. What she did with every single rat is she would drop it in the maze again and again and again, 150 times per animal. And unsurprisingly, the rats would get faster and faster and faster at finding the chocolate, right? There would be a click, the partition would move, the rat would start making a beeline to the chocolate. In fact, the rat would start doing it so quickly that it started to look like a habit. What was really interesting, though, is that as the rat got faster and faster and faster at finding the chocolate, it started thinking less and less and less. This is a simplified graph of the neurological activity in the 150th iteration through that maze. And that deep valley that you see in brain activity, that's the same thing that you would see if the rat was going to sleep. Now, there's a woman named Dr. Wendy Wood, who's a researcher today at USC, she was at Duke, who followed around hundreds of people for an entire year, trying to figure out how much of our daily activities are habits and how much are decisions. And what she found out is that about 40 to 45% of what all of us do every day is not a choice, it's a habit. When you're backing your car out of the driveway and you're kind of on autopilot, when you remember leaving home and now you're at your desk and you are certain that you did drive from home to your desk, but you can't really remember how, that's because a habit took over. When you tell your spouse in the morning, I'm gonna go have a salad for lunch today because I'm trying to lose a couple pounds, and then you walk into the cafeteria and get the same hamburger that you get every single day without thinking about it or pretending you're not thinking about it, that's because your brain is actually turned off. When we are in the grip of a habit, we actually stop thinking. In fact, this is an amazing part of evolution. Every single animal has a neurological structure known as the basal ganglia that exists simply to make habits. Because without them, we would have to think about everything all the time. We'd be exhausted. But there's this interesting exception to this turning off and shutting down rule, which is at the beginning of a maze, when a rat hears that click, that means that the partition's about to open, there's this burst of neurological activity right there. And then brain activity tapers down as it scurries through the maze, and then it finds the chocolate at the end, and it's as if the rat's brain shakes itself awake again, starts paying attention to what's going on, very close attention. Now, as Dr. Graybiel found this neurological signature of a habit, and she published it, it transformed everything about how we think about automatic behaviors. Because what it told us is what's known today as the habit loop. What the habit loop says in both neurology and psychology is that a habit isn't actually one thing. It's three things. There's a cue, which is like a trigger for an automatic behavior to start. And then there's the routine, the behavior itself, what we think of as a habit. And then finally, a reward. And that reward is why your brain takes that pattern and makes it automatic. There is a reward, even if you're not aware of it, when you back your car out of the driveway. There's a reward, maybe it doesn't feel like it, when you drive from your home to your office and get to your desk. Somehow your brain is celebrating that you just completed a chunk of behavior that it expected. And what's important about this is that for years, everyone from Aristotle to Oprah has talked about changing habits, right? And most of the time they focus on the routine, they focus on the behavior. But what we now know is that if you can diagnose those cues and those rewards, if you can figure out what in your environment is causing the habit, then you have these new tools to fiddle with the gears and to change how you and your coworkers and your kids and your spouse, most importantly your spouse, how they automatically, unthinkingly behave.